slow practice. And then up tempo. Do you sometimes find that problem? A piece is working perfectly well when you do your slow practice and everything is securely in place, but then you try to speed it up and you get problems with unevenness, maybe the fingering going a bit astray, maybe some wrong notes start to creep in. Well, in this tutorial, I'm going to talk about what may be holding us back from getting pieces up to tempo and some steps we could take to gradually increase the tempo pieces. And this is response to a question I had about how to get pieces up to speed. So first of all, if you are struggling at playing a piece up to tempo, there could be several reasons. Firstly, you might need to ask yourself, is this the right repertoire for you at this point in your piano playing journey? So if you just find you've done a lot of practice at different tempi, but it's really not working, it may be that the piece is just slightly too technically challenging at the moment. Now, if that's the case, don't worry too much about that. Instead, keep practicing that at the slower speed, but learn other easier pieces that you can definitely get up to tempo. And then as you develop in your piano playing, you'll probably be able to revisit the piece that you're currently working on and struggling with, but you may well find then you are able to get it to tempo because your technique has improved. So that's the first thing I'd say. Make sure you're choosing the right repertoire that you can comfortably get to the performance tempo. The second thing that might be holding you back from getting a piece up to performance speed is that you maybe just haven't done enough of the slow practice. Maybe the muscle memory and the security isn't quite there. And if there are any problems at all in the slow practice version, then that's going to be amplified when you try it up to speed. So you need to make sure it's really secure at the slow tempo and feeling really comfortable and you really feel in control of it. The third thing is that what you may have done is done the slow practice and then you might immediately start to try it up to tempo. Occasionally that will work, but my experience is that most pieces need some steps in between the slow work and then the up to tempo work. And those are the steps I'm going to look at in this tutorial. The final thing I would say though, before we focus on those steps, is even when you've got a piece up to tempo, go back sometimes, and quite often, go back to doing slow practice. Slow practice is very useful because it's like putting a magnifying glass on the music. You can really hear every detail, you can really think about your hand movements and everything, and just make sure everything is totally in control. All the expression is exactly how you want it to be, and every detail is fully in place. So, let's assume we've learned a piece of music at a slow tempo, and we feel quite confident and happy with it. Let me talk you through 3 possible ways you might try increasing the tempo. Sometimes you can go straight in at performance tempo and it will work, but often these steps are required. The piece I played earlier, by the way, if you didn't recognise it, was the first movement of Mozart's First Sonata in C, K279. So I'm going to be using that as an example throughout this little tutorial. So the first method I would suggest is using a metronome. And a metronome is very useful for obviously keeping a steady beat, but also for gradually increasing tempo. And I wouldn't necessarily do this for the whole of a piece. But first of all, start with a speed that you can comfortably play the music. So let me set a tempo here. In fact, in this piece, I will probably have the metronome beating quavers initially. We'll do it a bit slower. Here we go, let's try that tempo. And I would keep practicing it at that speed until I felt it was absolutely secure, really in time with the metronome. And the metronome is a very useful tool. It could also drive you up the wall. So you might not necessarily want to do the whole movement with the metronome, but I would certainly check different sections each time I practice to make sure they all work at that tempo. And if any bits don't, I would obviously focus on that. When I feel comfortable with that tempo, I would just take the metronome up a few notches, perhaps 2 notches. Try again. And then a little bit more. At some point, I'm going to half the number, probably around about there, so that I'm now down to crotchet beat. Let's try this at crotchet. And so on. So I'm just using the metronome as a tool to help me slowly increase that tempo. Now I wouldn't expect to go from my slow tempo to my final performance tempo in one practice session, certainly not. But I can just increase that metronome a little bit each time I practice perhaps. And if there are any bits that don't work at the slightly increased tempo, I can focus on those and get those really secure. So that is method 1, using a metronome to help me get things up to tempo. Method 2 that I would suggest you might use is to increase the tempo on very small segments. So let me demonstrate. I'm just going to play the very opening of this piece up to tempo. Just that segment. Now I might try the next segment. And if I'm happy with that, the next bit. So I'm playing it up to tempo. I haven't done the gradual increase in the tempo, but I'm working on very small segments at a time, literally just groups of 4 semiquavers. And you can repeat segments, or you can just pause and do one at a time. And of course, once I'm happy with that, I might do slightly bigger segments like this. And so on. So that's another technique, is to do very small segments of your piece up to tempo and then increase the size of those segments. The segments can, by the way, be even smaller. It could just be that, if you'll find it tricky. Yeah, so you can do really tiny parts of the music at a time. So we've got the option of increasing the speed gradually with the metronome, practicing very small segments. Third option, especially on semiquaver passage work, which there's a lot of in this piece, is to try different rhythms. So with this section, I could do a dotted rhythm. I could dot it the other way. I can make up other rhythms. Now you might say, how is that helping me get it up to tempo? Well, what it's doing is, if you think of the dotted rhythm, pairs of notes are being played at a very fast tempo. And then when I dot it the other way, other pairs. So when I do different rhythms, pairs or very small groups of notes are being practiced at a faster tempo. And that can be a really useful step towards getting things up to speed. One thing I think is very important is, throughout this process, make sure you are relaxed. So when you start to increase the tempo of pieces, it's very easy for tension to start to creep in. Yes, I'm trying really hard to get it up to speed. My shoulders are going up, my wrists are tense. That is not going to help you and is going to cause more harm than good. So just make sure you feel relaxed. And if you don't feel relaxed at the speed you're trying to practice at, that's probably a sign you need to be doing it a little bit slower at that point. Having looked at these three methods, there are others as well, but these are the three main methods of getting things up tempo. So gradually increasing with a metronome, small segments, different rhythms. You might be thinking, well, which of those should I choose for my next piece that I'm working on? I'm trying to get this piece up to tempo. Which of those three methods should I use? Well, I would say try them all. See what works for you. And actually, what I often find is it's a combination. So for example, with a piece like this Mozart, I might do my slow metronome work and intersperse it with dotted rhythms. Let me show you. I'm going to do a slow metronome version first. Now I'm going to put my metronome off, but I'm going to try this time with dotted rhythms for the semiquavers. Now I might do my small segment practice. And so on, and then I might go back to the metronome and try it a little bit quicker. And so on. I sometimes think of all these things a bit like a toolbox. As pianists, we've got lots of different tools that we can use in our practice. Three of them I've shown you now. You've got hand separate practice, you've got various other techniques you could be using in your practice. And I think what we often have to do is find the right tools to solve the problem in a piece of music. Sometimes one tool does the job. Sometimes we have to try lots and lots of different tools, and we find maybe a combination of 2 or 3 tools helps us solve the problem. And I think that's the case with speeding things up. Try the different methods I've suggested. See what works for you on the piece you're working on. So I hope you found that useful, and I'm looking forward to really doing a series of YouTube tutorials where I'm going to be answering your questions. So if you have any questions you'd like me to look at, let me know in the comments. And you can also sign up to my practice letter email list, and I will be keeping everybody on that mailing list up to date with the tutorials. So if you're looking for an answer to your question, if you sign up to the mailing list, you'll know when I've done a tutorial about that. And you also get free weekly piano practice tips and a free piano practice checklist. So check out the description of this video to see how you can subscribe to that. Thank you for watching.